Hi, I'm Tiana, and today I'm asking around about reading. I love reading as a thing to do, but I'm not very good at practicing the habit. Right now I have a new program for graphic design by David Rainford and the picture of Dorian Gray going. You can see I'm not very far into either of them. I think it's time that I ask for some casual and even professional help. So today we'll go around town and see if we can find anyone to help me with that. My screen time is impressive in ways that I'm actually not very proud of. Last week, my daily average was 6 hours a day. And while that was 33% down from the previous week, I'm gonna really try to take that as a sign to take up a healthier habit like reading. It's rhetorical to say that reading soothes your anxiety, helps you go to sleep, even lowers your blood pressure, and not to mention teaches you everything. So, yet I'm still trying to put myself to sleep by scrolling on TikTok, and that's just an oxymoron. So I'm gonna try to get out of that and into this, but starting a new habit is also really intimidating in itself. I often find that when I'm trying to learn something internally about myself, it actually helps most to go outwards. So I interviewed 3 people about their reading habits. I started close to home with my roommate Priyanka. And then I visited Zoe de Maison, my friend, who I feel like has closer taste in books to me. Yeah. And then we're gonna visit Peter Sellers, who owns the bookshop Sellers in Newal in Toronto. So this is Priyanka,
Hi.
my roommate. And these are the books in our apartment.
These books belong to all of us, like there are 4 of us in the house. We do have some cookbooks here, so I think that's the most interesting part because some of us like to cook. I actually go through a book, open it and see the measurements, and so yeah.
Nice.
We are all into global affairs, poli-sci kind of fields. So you'll see a lot of books that are related to history and sociology mostly.
When you were growing up, what was your relationship with books?
Actually, that's very interesting because I know exactly when I started to read. I was in 7th grade, and back in India in schools, at least the school I was in, we didn't have a section where we are supposed to pick up a book from the library and read. Like, we didn't have any of that. We had what we study and that's it. And then there was this one time during summer vacation when I was a very hyperactive kid. So although I had a lot of friends to play with, but there's this dull time in the afternoon where you don't have anyone to play with. And I would my mom went to office, she went to work, but on weekends I would tell her how bored I was in the afternoon because no friends wanted to play in the sun. That's how she decided to enroll me in the library in our neighborhood. This one is fiction, All My Puny Sorrows. That's fiction, the rest of them are non-fiction.
And what kind of fiction was it that you read?
It is very intense. So the reason I read that book is because I watched a movie of that book. So first I watched the movie, it's Canadian, and it was so sad. So the book is also very sad. It's about the right to take your own life. Although I say it's fiction, I think it's true stories, so not really fiction. I have passed that stage in my life where I can read a fiction book, a made up stories. So.
Yeah. What do you think that is? Or do you think you're just more drawn to something true?
I think I can relate to it more or feel more if I know it has happened to someone. So, and there's more to learn. It's not like there's not enough to learn in fiction books, but with true stories, I feel more drawn in. So I will proudly say that I was one of those very enthusiastic, young adult in the library. I reached a stage where I was done with reading all of the kids and the young adult books, and it was now what to do. And the librarian, she was very sweet, and she during my 10th grade decided to let me read adult books.
Whoa.
I never had a favorite or anything. I just read whatever I could lay my hands on. My mom got pissed off how much I read. And she's like, keep the book down, go out and play.
What's your favorite thing about reading?
I think 2 things come to my mind. One thing was when I was reading as a kid, as a young adult, as a teenager, and that was a little bit different. I felt I read a lot then because it was definitely a very nice escape from reality. I have this clear memory of this feeling that I could read a book for hours and I would literally forget what's happening in my house. If my mom and dad are fighting, like I would just totally forget that thing. Now it's less about escaping, more about educating myself. I feel like I don't know how good or bad it is. I think there should be a balance, but I feel like I don't know enough. There are different ways in gaining knowledge and educating yourself in different things in the world. But reading I feel it's a more healthy way. I don't know how much of your audience will know this, but this is Desperately Seeking Shahrukh. He is a famous actor, a Bollywood actor, and he's like, basically we all grew up with his movies. So the Bollywood romance that I grew up with, and the reason I'm still single is because of this guy, because he has set the bar too high. So this book is basically, it's not a story, it's also non-fiction. It's about research done by a woman in her 30s. So she also grew up with his movies, and about how it changed and shaped the way Indian women think about love and marriage and relationships. So what are their expectations from men? So it's pretty interesting,
wow.
actually.
How did he change it? Like, what were the main takeaways from how he changed things?
That Indian men have a really high bar set by this actor, because how you treat women and everything. And it's not also just about love, but about women trying to claim their independence, their right to choose, and that empowerment that comes unfortunately from a man, but at least it is so the whole gist of it is that at least it is something that women found solace in his movies, to think that there is a world out there where they don't necessarily always have to cook and clean and look after their guy. So it's actually pretty sweet.
Yeah.
I went through this whole phase where I would not read, and then in the past 3-4 years, I think when I was doing my master's here, I started reading a little bit more, because we were asked to read a few books or papers or something like that. And then once I was done with my master's, we were in a pandemic. So that was another reason to now again pick up a book and start doing it all over. So all the books you saw on the shelf, like the single shelf, are all the books that I bought here in the past 3 years. So now it's way more tough. Like, I have to make a conscious effort. There are times when I write it down in my planner that read, so that I remember, so that I tick it off that yes, I did read 5 pages. Or it has to be a really interesting book. This one is The Sacred Balance. This one I bought when I was on my solo trip last year. I bought it in BC. It is all about understanding your relationship with nature, how we are not apart from nature, we are a part of it. And there's a lot of science involved, like basic high school, how we breathe, or how our body responds to the atoms and the energy in nature. So very basic things, and trying to relate it to what role it plays in our lives. So how we need to, the more we are in sync with it, the better our lives will be.
Yeah.
And no wonder I found it in BC, because I feel everyone there is so about hiking and about being out there, being outdoors.
Yeah. And I feel like as well, getting back to the basics of nature and stuff and how it relates to everything, it's just nice to read something like that where you kind of know what it's saying, but
it was very grounding. Mm-hmm. I feel so. It's amazing how relaxed you feel when you read about such things, when you realize that there is nothing that is separating you from the world around you. Like, we are all the same beings. Mm-hmm. So this was nice. This was I am in a place where it's full of nature, and I can read something and not think about how alone I am, because the root of this book is about we are not alone.
Yeah, I might borrow that one. Talking to Priyanka really opened up my view of what there is to read, because I'm always so drawn to, of course, my own interests, which are mostly in like art and design and spirituality even, and lots of fiction and romance. But Priyanka obviously loves global affairs, and she loves learning. She loves being smart because she's intelligent, very intelligent. And I just feel like books like that are harder for me to read and get into. And I don't know if that's because I'm less practiced in reading or because my mind just doesn't want to read them. I feel like when I'm consuming that kind of information, I usually like to watch a documentary or something. Like, there's just different ways that people like to learn different kinds of information. But I definitely resonate with the book, The Sacred Balance. Well, I think I might. But so I'm planning to try to read this a bit. I feel like David Suzuki's spiritual approach to offering facts to a reader will be something that entices me, so we'll see.
Okay, so we've got this little like decorative shelf here with a lot of smaller books that could fit on it, lots of classics. You know, you've got like Brave New World, Catcher in the Rye, On the Road. Yeah, you know, like some of my favorite books are here. Not all of them, but some really good ones. Yeah, Wind Up Bird Chronicle is here. Braiding Sweetgrass was really good, really interesting. The Razor's Edge, I love this book so much. It's so good. Just vibes. That's what this book is. It's just vibes.
Something just very comforting about looking at a wall of books.
Yeah, I know.
But maybe a little bit daunting when too many of them become TBR.
I know.
Yeah, when's the last time you bought a book?
It's actually been a minute because I've intentionally been like, we need to read what we have. There's enough. I do like, however, having like a big TBR pile, because like those are all books that I want to read, but it depends on, you know, like you want to read the right book at the right moment.
Yes.
And I like having a selection, like, you know, do I want to read something that's going to get me out of a reading slump, like that's kind of a page turner, or not like literature per se, but like a good engaging story, then I want to have that option. Or if I want something that feels like super dense and academic or whatever, I want that option. I want like lighter reads and heavier reads, and I always like fiction, nonfiction. I always like having options. But I have too many options right now, and I need to control myself.
What?
These are on my TBR. There's a lot. Don't judge me. Whenever I'm like ready to read a new book, I come here. Oh wait, I read this. I don't know why that's open, but I come here and I'm like, okay, what am I feeling in this moment?
And what mode do you think you're in lately with the type of book?
I've been in a reading slump for the past month. I know that I'll find my way back to it in like a couple weeks. It's very cyclical for me, so I'm not worried about it. But yeah, I think it's important to kind of respect where you're at. Like, you know, sometimes I'm just trying to read always. Like last January, I think I read like 9 books in the month. Like it was crazy. But then this January, I'm just focusing on other things, and that's okay. Like I'm into writing this month, and so that's nice too. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like reading is always in your life in some way, whether it's actually a novel or if it's TikTok captions.
Exactly. There you
So-
go. Wow. Print that quote and put it on the wall. It's beautiful. I've always journaled, and by always I mean like probably since I was like 17 or 18. So I've got like 10 years worth of journals just piled up over there. And yeah, I go through phases with writing too, where like I'll have an idea that just like I keep thinking about. And so when I'm in that headspace, I try to lean into it and take advantage. So the first Murakami book I read wasn't the Wind Up Bird Chronicle. It was after the quake, which I think is here somewhere. Anyway, that was the first like magical realism-y book that I read, and that definitely unlocked a deep love for magical realism. And it's like it's a genre I'm obsessed with, and it's something that I try to like emulate now in my own writing and in some aspects. So that was definitely like a gateway book in many ways. I'm trying to force myself to just like write and not worry about it being bad, because your first draft of anything is always going to be kind of nonsensical and not great. But just like, I don't know, when you kind of do that stream of consciousness thing, I think you'll get like, 90% of it'll be just garbage, but then you'll get those little tidbits in the final 10% that are, you know, little ideas that you didn't even know you had, and there's always like, oh, there's something there, and I want to explore that, and those are the things that usually lead to greater ideas coming to fruition.
Do you have a relationship with the library at all, either now or in your past?
I did as a kid, for sure. I've been thinking about this a lot, actually, because libraries are such amazing resources. Anyway, we would go once a week, and I would take out a few books, and we'd usually like read one together that night, and then I'd have the other two for the week, and then we'd go back and, you know, do the switch. And that was a really beautiful ritual. And I remember just being, you know, I'd gone to like my school library, which was tiny in comparison, but I remember the first time I was at the library just being like so amazed by the selection, being like, wait, it was like that Matilda moment. Like, I can take any of these home for free, like, and I can just read it for free, and there's all of like this huge selection. Like, that was pretty amazing. I miss it.
I would go to the library a lot with my grandma as a kid.
That's so nice.
Yeah, and Winnipeg had pretty decent selection.
Were you a Harry Potter?
Yeah, I was gonna ask about, because when I was a kid, my mom would read me the Harry Potter books, and I feel like just like having someone read to you, especially someone like a parent figure, I felt like it was like a good time to almost be creative with my mom.
Yeah.
Whereas she, you know, otherwise is an accountant and not very creative. It was kind of like play to be read to. So I wonder, do you have a relationship with being read to? Have you?
Oh yeah, my parents were like, I'm very amazed at how they managed to do what they did. Like, they were both in university when they had me, like also working full time to pay for school, and also with the newborn babe. Like anyway, they read to me almost every night, and my mom also read me the Harry Potter books. And yeah, when we got to the fourth one, I was like, how old was I? Like maybe like I was in grade 4, I think. She was like, I think you're old enough to read this to yourself. And I was like, whoa. And that was the first big book I read by myself. And my dad is French Canadian, and we got into this French series called Noémie. It's like about this like 7-year-old girl who's very close to her neighbor. It's like a grandma figure to her. And I had like my special series for each of my parents, and yeah, we'd alternate. But yeah, most nights I got like a little 20-minute, half-hour reading session, and it was really special.
That's cute.
I used to read to my cat too.
Oh, what did you read to your cat?
There's a picture of me reading it's like an Elliot Moose book when I was like 6 or 7.
And do you ever read to Odie?
I do sometimes, yeah. I like reading out loud. It feels good. I don't know. Also, like, yeah, it feels like I'm being read to, but I'm the one reading.
Yeah. What are your favorite books?
Okay. I was actually just thinking about this the other day. We were just talking about the Wind-Up Bird Chronicle. I feel like that's a lot of people's favorite books, but it's really, really good. Yeah, it's a Haruki Murakami book. And I read that because in M Train by Patti Smith, she keeps talking about this book. Like I think she was reading it as she was writing. Oh, and I've got Pachinko there, here. And Homegoing. Yeah, those are. The Giver, this is it's like a children's book, I think.
Oh.
Or young adult fiction, but it's so good. I read it last year. I've gotten into reading like children's literature.
How does that feel?
I love it. I love it. It's so good. I read this play last year, A Raisin in the Sun. It's like the best play I have ever read. I think she was 29 when this was published. And when it was like performed on Broadway, just amazing.
I like to kind of set the scene for reading before I get into reading. Like, how do you set the Maison scene for a reading session?
Candle for sure. Cozy. Gotta be cozy. Like, I can't read without socks on. I don't know why.
True.
I have like sensory things, so I always need to have my hands moisturized. So that's important. And then usually like I need my water and tea or coffee. I don't need it, but it helps.
It's nice when it's there and you know it's there.
Yeah, and I don't want to be in a like very messy environment because then I can't focus as well.
Yeah. I admire people who read on the train or read on public transport.
Yeah. The only time I've successfully done that was in high school. I read The Hunger Games. I read all 3 in 2 days.
Wow.
Like I was fully just reading them in math class. Like, I just became obsessed. And those are a perfect example of like a page-turnery book, and they're like very good in their own right. I mean, at least to my 17-year-old self, they were brilliant. Like, I was like literally on the bus and then got off the bus walking to my house, like on the sidewalk, just reading, probably pissing people off. But yeah, I can read on planes. Like planes is fine, or like even if it was like a Greyhound bus or like a, you know, a long train ride where everybody kind of settles down and it's quiet.
Yeah. There's a comfort to those places as well once they're settled. So
it's those are kind of my favorite places to read, because it's like, what else are you gonna do? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like whenever I go away for work and I'm like in a hotel room, I read a lot. So I have books that remind me of different projects I've worked on.
Like which one?
Joyland by Stephen King randomly reminds me of like working on the first season of Riverdale. I usually read a Stephen King book every October because it's spooky. And I read that in my hotel room in October, so that reminds me of that. Same with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, actually. I mean, The Razor's Edge, which I talked about, that and Julia Child's autobiography. I read both of those in Paris, so those remind me of being in Paris. And they both have like, Julia Child's autobiography is all set in Paris, and there are moments in The Razor's Edge that are set in Paris, so that just felt very strange, because I didn't really know that going into them.
How have you noticed reading has like made an impact on your mental health?
It makes me feel good about myself in a way. I feel like it's very rare that I walk away from a book without having learned something or without having been challenged in some way.
I feel like it's so good for my anxiety as well.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Because I feel like so much when there's anxiety, like my mind is just spiraling on something, and reading will just give you like a few different things to think about.
Definitely, yeah. It's always just nice to have like a break from your own mind too. It's like escapism is so nice, and I think like every single human on the planet loves stories, whether you take them in by reading or by watching movies or even just like by sharing stories with your friends. Like it's like just so ingrained in all of our DNA, and I think part of that is just kind of, it allows you to decompress and to activate your imagination.
Yeah, there's escapism, and there's also like just finding new interesting things. Like just like finding new desires and obsessions. I feel like often comes with, I read an article or I read a book and they mentioned that, and now I'm obsessed with that. Like how I got into like a few bands. I remember in middle school, I got the playlist that they mentioned in Perks of Being a Wallflower. And I would listen to that while I was playing The Sims, and it was like shoegazy music and just all these bands that I otherwise would have never found. Just the way that books can open you up to like things like that. Or even like Patti Smith probably taught you a lot of things in her books.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah, she's so cool. I do think that there's a true magic that comes from reading the perfect book at the perfect time in your life. And I feel like that's kind of how you find your favorite books, right? It's almost like falling in love with a person. Like you can meet the most perfect person, but at the timing could be wrong, and it just won't work. It's kind of the same with books. You know, like when something just clicks and resonates and helps you cope with something that you're maybe struggling with. Like that's really magical, and it's cool that books can do that.
Yeah, totally.
You know? Yeah.
Nice. So that was my first time visiting my friend Zoe's apartment, and looking around at her shelves, I definitely could see a lot of books that interested me. It was nice to learn from a bookworm who has similar interests in books. Zoe has such a grounded presence, and I can't help but wonder if reading is a part of that recipe. It just seems that if you can create this habit of reading which is also a habit of focus and even meditation, then you just end up preparing yourself more for life's stresses. So I see that in Zoe, and I'm trying to channel that in myself. I think it exists there already, but I just need to practice more, and reading is such a good way to do that. I gotta get into a focus zone soon. I have some drawing to do for a website, but before then I'm gonna practice focusing by trying to read a little bit. Today I have the Arena Annual of 2023. My friend Meg gave me this copy. Thanks, Meg. And I haven't really touched it yet, so I'm gonna do that and listen to some Tiana Dueck and give myself an hour to realize that there is time and get into more of a calm state. That'll be good to do some work in after I do some reading. And this is like a nice collection of independent essays and such, so it's super inspiring to read artists write about things they're passionate about. So I think it'll be good motivation to get started on my work. So I read 2 chapters out of the Arena Annual. One was about teaching and how it sucks that it can't be more community-based and so institutional. And the other was about shrines and how fan bases create shrines and the kind of spirituality and giving nature of a fan base. Anyways, I think I'm gonna read a bit more because I've only read for about 15 minutes really. I'm kind of surprised. I always think that I'm a slow reader, but I think especially this is easier to read. The font is a nice size, and the content is somewhat familiar, and the speak is very it feels conversational. It feels like someone's talking at me, and it's nothing crazy to read. Whereas when I go to read this, like Oscar Wilde, was written so long ago, there's a bit of a difference in trying to read this. It's still super easy and it's so humorous, and I love Oscar Wilde. How he writes is so funny. And a new program for graphic design. I feel myself, this is the kind of book I feel like I'd have to read it twice to really absorb everything, it has a lot of information and a lot of names and years and all that, and I'm sure there's parts of the book that have less of that, but it just feels like I'm studying when I read this one. And that's it's kind of funny how I feel right now. I feel like I want to read more of this right now, as opposed to Oscar Wilde, who's just kind of silly and fun. But I've also heard about the twist in this one, and I'm not there yet, and I really like where it is right now, and I don't want to face the twist. And I'm kind of realizing I do like listening to ambient music, like Tiana Dueck's tunes, while I'm reading. I kind of felt I had the thought while I was reading, whoa, I'm radiating. I'm radiating joy right now. And I don't have that thought when I'm scrolling on TikTok. And I feel like having a reading habit can have so much to do as well with your self-esteem in a way. It's oh, do I want to do good things for myself? I love doing good things for others, but then doing something good for yourself sometimes for some reason feels like you're stepping out of your way to do that. But part of me believes in hedonism, and reading is hedonistic, so I'm gonna become more of a follower of that. And I do always have a few books on the go. I'm always reading something, but it's just the pace that is turtle-esque. I'm gonna read a bit more and then get to my work. I think this page is kind of funny. I talked with a couple people I interviewed about finding a comfortable position to be reading in, and now this book that I'm reading is talking about finding a comfortable position to be reading in. That's pretty cute. If you were gonna start somewhere in the shop, where would you start?
I'd start right up here.
Right up here?
This is my row of Simon Raven books, and he's my favorite author. Absolutely fabulous, rude, funny, brilliant, beautiful writer who is relatively unknown now, but he just wrote some remarkable books from 1959 until the early 90s, and I just love him. So we keep a ton of Simon Raven here. So he's got this special place of honor.
Because there's a lot of older books, it seems like.
Well, that's mostly what we do.
Yeah. So how do you come to find so many older books? And
Well, if you, sorry, hold on for a second. Are we rolling?
Yeah, we're actually rolling.
Oh. Okay, so let me back up. How do we find older books? You find what you look for, right? So, and people contact us daily with, you know, are you buying books? I have a whole bunch of books that I found, or somebody in the family unfortunately has passed away and they had a collection of books. And so we only will look at certain things. If they're new, we don't look at them. And by new, I mean like things that were published initially within, say, the last 20 or 25 years. There's very, very little in that category that we're gonna want to take in here. Mostly we do early and mid 20th century lit, poetry, philosophy. One of the advantages of that is, which as I say somewhat jokingly, is I don't have to learn anything new. It's all books that I'm familiar with, and that are traditionally things that people want to read, or things that people have to read if they're on courses and things like that. One of the best poetry sections, I think, in the city. We also do a lot of books on jazz. We do a lot of horror fiction. And so we are only looking for very, very specific things. This place is so small that we just can't do everything. I love the coffin, which has been here since the day we opened, and houses, obviously, our sort of vampire stuff, some ghost stories, some horror fiction and weird fiction. And this was used once for its original purpose way back. And we're really proud of the poetry. Yeah, we work really hard to keep this well stocked with meaningful work. Over here, we have our philosophy, which again is you know, fairly comprehensive. It's a challenge based on how much of that stuff we move. It's a challenge to keep it adequately stocked. So we're working on that all the time. It's careful in a sense because it reflects pretty much my taste. Or in some cases, there's stuff here that I really don't like. That
What
I
do
think
you?
is, you know, but it's important. So, you know, without naming specific authors, there are people whose work I just couldn't be bothered reading. But I do understand that over the course of time, they're significant figures in the development of 20th century literature and what has followed. So, okay, they're important. We'll carry them. And that's about. And then there are some people who are really, really successful, but the writing is just so damn bad I won't have it on the shelf.
Fair. And how did you get into reading in the first place?
I don't think I actually read much when I was a kid. A lot of people say, "Oh, I was really young. I was reading." Nah, you know, I was not. I didn't really do a lot of that. I mean, I read some Hardy Boys books. My parents certainly always read to me when I was a kid, but I don't think I started reading seriously until I was in high school. And then I read crime fiction voraciously. I discovered Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett, and it just sort of took off from there. This here, these two bookcases, is crime fiction, which is a particular interest of mine, and I love that stuff. And then I became a reader, and then a book collector. And I amassed 2 storage lockers full of books, which I had just shortly before I opened this place.
And when it came to starting the music nights and stuff, like what sparked that in the beginning? How did those start?
That was June of 2015 that we did the first concert, and I wanted something that was going to bring people into the store. And at that time, there were an awful lot of live music venues closing in the city. Just, they were disappearing daily practically. And I thought, well, what about if I put live music in here? And one of my customers, a great trumpet player named Tim Hamill, was in here one day, and he said, you know, Peter, this music would sound great in here. Live music would sound great. So I thought, okay, great. So I asked a tremendous local singer-songwriter named Kevin Quain if he would do a show. And on, I think it was the 11th of June in 2015, we put on a show, and it was a success. So I thought, what the heck, we'll just do more. I started out doing one a month. Some worked, some didn't. But we kept going, and now I've done about 230 shows. And like next month in February, I think I've got 15 booked. starting out from one. So, and musicians from all over the world have contacted me to play here, and the sound in here is great, and
with the books.
performers love it. This is our jazz section. Part of it, this is a fraction of what we have sort of buried by these boxes. I like this because there's a ton of great stuff in there, and we keep that right next to the piano. And I love the piano, which sounds great in here.
When it comes to like the overlap of like reading and books with music as well, like do people, when they come for the events, do you see people flipping through books as well?
Frequently,
right?
Yeah, so the plan is working.
And I think it makes for a really nice social night too, like flipping through a book can just be such a good conversation starter as well, or talking about the books you liked. Like, are there a lot of conversations about what people are reading?
There are some. It's, you know, there's probably more talk about music, but definitely there's talk about books. The question I get asked, which I always find charming, and is people come in and say, "Is it okay if I buy a book?" when they're here for a music thing, and it's like, "Oh yeah, that's the reason I do this. That's actually why you're here."
Nice.
So that it's worked out.
So what's your favorite kind of book right now?
I couldn't necessarily say. I tend to read a combination of literary fiction, I guess. So I'm currently reading a book called Noonday by Pat Barker, which is the third volume of a trilogy, which is terrific. Before that, I read Jeff Dyer's But Beautiful, which is possibly the best book I've ever read about jazz. So it's a mixed bag of things, a little bit of nonfiction, a little bit of fiction. I just try to read whatever interests me. Because of doing this, I try not to focus too much on one specific area, because I want to be able to talk about as wide an array of things as possible when the customers come in. And I do get customers come in and say, "Oh, have you read all of these?" And it's like, no, but I can bluff my way through on a bunch of them. You know?
Yeah, I feel like I pick up and I put down reading a lot, but what do you think made it stick for you? I
don't know. I just liked it, right? I love language. But that's me, right? Once I got into it and once I found something I liked. Couple of bits of advice I would give is, first of all, if you see these things online that say, 10 books you should read before you die, it's all garbage, right? There's absolutely nothing that you should read. There's only things that you want to read, things that you might enjoy. Never ever go by anybody else's list, because they don't know you. And never ever be afraid to stop reading. Like sometimes I was reading a book, I started reading a book which shall go unnamed, and now I admit I'm maybe a snob, I don't know, but I hit a sentence on page 3, and I just thought, oh no, this is so bad, this makes no sense historically, because it was a work of historical fiction. It was also set in Canada by somebody who didn't live here, and I just thought, I'm not gonna, no, this is just bad. And so never be afraid to stop reading something if you're not enjoying it. Because if you force yourself to read stuff that you don't like or stuff that you think is crap, why would you want to keep reading?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So, if you love it, stick with it, and if you don't like it, ditch it. Life's too short.
Yeah, I feel like you've mentioned just reading books that are about things that interest you. I feel like it starts with what interests you, and going from there, and you'll just naturally read it. Yeah,
and I think that's a really, really good idea. A lot of people come in looking for the latest bestseller, and we don't really carry many of those. There are a few authors who, like we do carry Cormac McCarthy, because I happen to think he was a tremendous writer. But there's not too much stuff like that. Sarah Waters is another one. She's one of the few authors who's still alive, whose work we have in here, because I think she's just absolutely splendid. We got very, very limited space, that everything here has some merit for somebody. And for everybody, absolutely not. If everybody liked everything in here, we'd be doing something wrong.
Yeah. Are you someone who can just read anywhere, or do you like to find a comfortable spot? Or what's your ideal place to sit and read a book?
I like to lie down to read. I'm slightly hyper, so I have difficulty sitting still to begin with. But if I'm lying down, I tend to be able to stay in one spot a little longer. I will frequently fall asleep when I'm reading. I have a friend who sits in a hard wooden chair when he reads, and I just don't know how he does it, but he burns through more books than anybody I've ever met.
How have your reading habits like changed since those high school times to now? Like, how have you noticed your relationship to reading like
I read a lot less, right? Once I got married and had kids and then started working full time and I just had less time. You know, when you're in university, as I was taking English, you got nothing but time to read. And I know there was one year, because I obsessively kept a tally of how many books I read over the course. I read 102 books in a year. And like nothing like that is ever going to happen again. So it's, I read when I can, you know.
How many books a year is it these days?
It's an embarrassingly small number. Yeah.
That's okay. Bigger than my number. And then also, I was talking to my friend about like being read to as a kid.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have kids yet, but you do have kids. And like, did you read to them while they were growing up?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What kind of books would you read?
Well, a lot of classics, you know, Winnie the Pooh stuff and that. They really liked some things that made me shake my head, but they loved them. All kinds of things, all kinds of interactive stuff. Those Richard Scarry books where you got to find particular characters on all these crowded pages, sort of like a Where's Waldo thing before Where's Waldo came out. And all kinds of different storybooks. You know, when they got to the point where before they could read, but they'd memorize books because we'd read them so often. And if you got a word wrong, they'd point it out and make you go back. And they knew exactly when you had to turn the page. You know, that kind of stuff. I just thought was great. I just loved it. It was just really, it was. I hate to say magical, but it kind of was. It was very special.
Were you read to as a child?
Oh yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What was your favorite book as a kid? Like as it was small.
That's hard to say. One I do remember with great fondness was The Wind in the Willows. I loved Toad and Badger, and that was really fun and exciting.
Yeah, those are cozy books. Yeah. Did your kids have a favorite?
I'd have to ask them.
Yeah.
You know, I can't remember specifically. There would seem to me there were a bunch.
Yeah, right.
Because they'd pick out, okay, Dad, we're going to read these 6 books. You know, so.
Have you ever noticed like reading having a positive or any kind of effect on your mental health, like when you're?
Oh yeah, for sure. I have no idea who said this, but there's this old quote from somebody: "There is no frigate like a book to take you worlds away." I think that's the quote. And I think it's that. It's okay if it's really good and you get involved in it. Nothing else matters for the time being. So it gives you something else to focus on. Gives your brain a rest. It can be, you know, it's exciting or makes you laugh, makes you think. Does a whole bunch of things to get you out of the headspace that you were in. I think that's one of the key things. And you learn stuff. You know. Sometimes you discover subsequently that what you learned was wrong, but in the short term, you got new information coming in, and that's always good.
Do you write, and does that overlap with your reading habits if you do?
A bit. I mean, not much now. I used to write short crime fiction, which was very definitely connected with what I had read extensively when I was in high school and years afterwards. So, but I'm a very, very slow writer, and I don't do it much now. I shouldn't say I should, but yeah, no, I really should, because it's fun to do. I hate the process though. It's really hard. It's hard work, but I love it when it's finished.
Yes, yeah. The blank page is really freaky.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once you have something wrong.
What's worse than a blank page is a page that isn't blank, but the writing's crap.
Yeah. And then do you start over? Do you try?
Yeah, a lot of editing, a lot of rewriting.
And when you write, would it be mostly fiction stuff, or what kind of stuff?
It's all short crime fiction. I mean, I made my living as a writer in the ad business, so I did a ton of that kind of stuff. And then there's the basement, which is an adventure. We have a lot of books down here. This is where we keep our French books. We have literary criticism. We have a lot of that stuff. We have Canadiana, military history, music stuff that isn't jazz. We have a good selection of books on chess.
Cool.
and that's the place.
It's great.
And then in the back, this. I'm not sure where this guy came from. He showed up one day. I was on holiday, and I think Daryl brought him in, and they posted a thing of him behind the counter having taken my place while I was on vacation. So he's been down here, and I still, to this day, I come down and I think there's somebody here because I see him. But yeah.
That's funny.
But we don't have a name for him.
Oh, nameless guy.
Yeah, he's just the guy in the basement.
Very mysterious.
Yeah. Sometimes it's trial and error, but you just got to find what works for you. And it's out there. And, and it's probably in here.
Yeah, I'm going to take a look around.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Tiana.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it. Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Talking to Peter was really insightful. Obviously, he has so much more experience than me, and I think it's so cool that he's surrounded by books all day and just probably has this plethora of knowledge about books and authors that I will just never obtain. So it's great to learn from those kinds of people. I'm really surprised I missed out on picking up a Simon Raven book because he immediately, when we did the book tour, he immediately said that was his favorite author. So at least I know I have to go back and get one of those, which will be nice. But what I did pick up was Hans Holzer's Hidden Meanings and Dreams, which is this super cute little book that I really think will be a good morning read. I have a problem in the mornings where I'll just reach for my phone. Either I'll be like scared that there's an email I missed or something. It's like, they can wait. Let me read my book about dreams for a minute, okay? It's 9 a.m. or 8 a.m., I don't know. I really appreciated Peter's bluntness about how some books will piss him off or just aren't very good. And I've definitely had a couple books where I've read them and at first maybe I thought it was cool, and then at some point I was like, what is this? And I just like literally could have burned the book. So I resonated with that, and just unabashedly putting a book down, it's weird how there can become this embarrassment of like, oh, I didn't finish that book. And it can feel almost like unfinished business, like am I gonna be left here on earth after I die as a ghost because there's unfinished business reading some terrible book that I tried to start. I really hope not. But it was really reassuring to hear, especially as someone who's trying to create a stronger reading habit, that hey, if it's not working out with something, then just move on. It's that simple. And so I'm allowing myself to do that. I've also been finding that I'm allowing myself to jump between a few books even in one reading session. I love having a few books going because it's kind of like the TikTokification of a reading habit. My mind can like get maybe a little bit bored of one story and I can hop into something else that I'm also interested in. And that seems to work for me a bit. So that's some stuff that I took away from sitting with Peter Sellers in Newal in Toronto. Go check out his shop if you're ever in Toronto. Thanks so much for asking around with me today. I had so much fun talking to new people and my friends about reading and everything that's underneath that umbrella. I'll definitely be asking around again next month, so stay tuned for that. And for now, I might do a little bit of reading. See ya!